All right, here with King County Prosecutor Dan Satterberg, checking in with us. We appreciate you taking the time today. A real serious issue and an issue that's near and dear for us in Converge Media. A lot of our audience is represented in the Black community, really, in Seattle and King County. And the latest numbers have come out here talking about Q3 total shootings and shots fired. Man, what's going on?
Well, what's going on is a historic spike in violence in King County, but it's not limited to King County. I was just on a phone call with district attorneys across the country, and violence is way up in places like Los Angeles and New York, but even setting records in historically very violent places like Milwaukee and Kansas City. They're seeing all-time records. So something about the conditions of 2020 are leading people to resort to violence, and it's a national phenomenon, but certainly these numbers in King County are quite disturbing.
Right, and what we find here is, unfortunately, even when I was in high school, you could say that these numbers were very similar here in Seattle, and it kind of remains the same here, is that the majority, I see the African American. Maybe you could explain. Actually, let me send this over to you. Maybe you can explain to everybody what we're looking at here with the shooting victim demographics.
Well, what it says in a nutshell is that gun violence in King County is highly concentrated among young people and in communities of color. 41% of the people who were shot so far this year were under the age of 25, and 74% were people of color. So that actually hasn't changed much over the years. It's been our real issue, which means the strategies have to involve investment in the community and investment in violence interruption and violence alternative programs. And we, as part of this data that we are keeping, we also know the names of the people who are most likely to be involved, either in people who've been around shootings, or, the statistics are pretty striking. If you know somebody who's been shot, your own chances of being shot go up about tenfold. If you've been shot once, your chance of being shot again are about 10 times higher. So people who are around gun violence and who know people who are involved in gun violence are highly at risk. And so we are able to take some of that information and share it with the community nonprofits that are willing to do the violence interruption work. And that's hard work to do. Not everybody wants to work with kids who are carrying guns or involved in that sort of thing. But we have some really good partners in our community, and it's time that we're going to invest a lot of money in them.
Right, and you've said, just like even right here in this conversation, that you're committed, in fighting gun violence. One of the other things you talked about is diverting many first-time adult felony charges. And can you talk to us about what resources or organizations might have been identified thus far to be able to do that work?
One of the few positive things about 2020 has been this desire by the county council, and I think the Seattle City Council as well, to invest in build up community capacity in these nonprofits that are willing to do this kind of work. So as part of my budget, I agreed to divert 1,000 adult felony cases, and these are the first time a person faces a felony. And that's important to me because we know what happens when you get that felony on your record. All of a sudden, the collateral consequences get in the way, and it's harder to find a job, and it's harder to get a place to live, and all of that. So we're going to, people who are facing that first felony, non-violent, non-domestic violence, non-sex assault, the things that you would decide to send out. We're going to be, as a county, investing almost $10 million in community response to those individuals. And that's a historic amount of money. And so I'm excited to see where this goes. The county's just putting the final touches on the budget, which should happen around Thanksgiving. And then there will be the request for proposals sent out to community groups that want to work on these cases and want to receive from me an individual who otherwise would go to court, and work with that person to avoid the predictable slide into the criminal justice system, and instead support them so that they can accomplish their dream. So I've wanted to work to expand our community justice for a long time, and it's just been hard to find the money. And now all of a sudden, because of the Black Lives Matter movement, because the whole racial justice spotlight is on our system, it's time to say, let's bring in the community in a much bigger way so that they can have a role in accountability. Now, another part of that that's important is that we're going to take care of the victims of those crimes as well. Right now, if you're a victim of a crime, let's say you get your cell phone stolen on a bus, or somebody somebody breaks a window in your car. You might have to wait 2 years to get a judge to order that individual to pay you, and they might pay you $20 a month, or they might not pay you at all. What we're going to do now, because sometimes that restitution gets in the way of a diversion, we're going to take care of that victim's needs first, and then you take that individual who caused the harm and send them to accountability in the community, and so that the restitution doesn't get in the way. Restitution may be part of that accountability that the community group comes up with, but it's not going to be the thing that keeps the community from working with that individual.
Right. And it's good that you brought up the victim side of this as well. What kind of programs does the prosecutor or the county have in place for victims? And I mean, you've got a tremendous number of victims, or either people who were murdered or people who have been shot. You got a neighborhood out there, 70 gunshots in one neighborhood. What kind of advocacy programs are out there for victims of people who are impacted by violence here?
Well, a huge strategy for reducing gun violence is to surround the victims with support. And the violence interruption programs that we think work the best are the ones that do come to either a family that's lost a loved one to crime, or a person who's in the hospital, they've been shot. That's when a contact is really important to be made, so that retaliation is not going to automatically happen without at least somebody from the community saying that's not the right way to go. And to provide, the victims, they need so much going forward. So we need to wrap our arms around the people who are hurt by gun violence. And in doing so, we're actually preventing further gun violence.
Right. And one or two more questions here. What is the King County Prosecutor's Office doing, and maybe in conjunction with law enforcement, to get guns off the street? Is that a concern for the prosecutor as well? Are you guys after the fact, or are you also working to be able to remove these guns off the street? It seems like it's a lot of guns out there.
Well, that's a big problem. And it's never been hard to find a gun here in Washington State. We're part of the Wild West. Guns are easy to find. We do have a program that I'm very proud of in our office, though, in domestic violence cases, where we can remove guns from the homes where there's been domestic violence once a judge orders the removal of those guns. The other part of gun violence that we don't talk much about is suicide, but it's important to know that 2 out of 3 people who are killed by guns kill themselves with guns. And so we have in our state the Extreme Risk Protection Order program. And so if a family is concerned about a loved one who has firearms, who's making comments about suicide or homicide, we can go to a court and have that court order those guns to be temporarily removed. And we have people in my office, and they work in conjunction with the police departments around the county to enforce the Extreme Risk Protection Order. So you're right. There are too many guns out there in the hands of people who are, at the moment, they might be in their worst moment of their life. And if we can disarm them and get them some services and calm that thing down, maybe we can prevent violence. And that makes us all happy when we don't just show up after people are dead and try to take cases to court, but we can show up and try to prevent violence. That makes us excited.
Right. Prosecutor Satterberg, I mean, when we look at this here, 59 firearm homicide victims, 197 non-fatal shooting victims, 767 shots fired incidents. I know you said that nationally, these kind of numbers are up, but would you consider this almost a state of emergency here in King County around this gun violence?
I think gun violence is a public health emergency. And it's, as I said, it's also suicides and it's other harm that's caused by gun and the domestic violence where guns play a role in intimidation. But if we really took it as a public health crisis, then that would have us investing more in the things that prevent gun violence. And I think that's where we're heading with involving community groups into a much larger extent than we've ever done, to support victims and also to be in touch with people who look like they're heading into a real high risk situation. These are the conditions today when our social institutions are shut down, schools and parks and the kinds of things, that community events that used to get people together to support each other, all that's disappeared. So in many ways, this is like the perfect condition to create more violence. And so we do need to pay people a living wage to do this work, because it's as important as any work that police do to get the community groups working with people who are at high risk of violence and to try to reduce their chance of being involved in gunfire. Because every person who's murdered with a firearm, that costs our community millions of dollars in every way that we measure that, from hospitals to legal fees to lost support and wages, and not to mention just the trauma and the ongoing trauma that creates, and the chance of retaliation. So all of those things are real, and if we can start to bring the violence down, then we will realize a big return on our investment.
All right, one last question for you here, Prosecutor Satterberg. We had a civil rights attorney, Sade Smith, was on the show this morning, and she made a revelation from her end, saying that the federal government, the FBI, and other agencies have been basically circumventing prosecutions from your office and going after protesters. I'll just play it short. It's about 20 seconds here.
What we're seeing is the federal agencies, FBI, actually jumping in. Like if somebody's arrested for a protester's allegations, they're combing social media, picking stuff off live streams. And before SPD even has the ability to write up the report, to send it to KCPAO, King County Prosecutor's Attorney's Office, for a referral to see if they're going to seek out to charge individuals, the feds are jumping in and snatching people and then holding them in federal custody.
Is this something that you're seeing here, that the FBI, the federal government, is involved in arrest and charging with protesters here in Seattle?
So the United States Attorney has concurrent jurisdiction with the county prosecutor, and so there are cases, and I think there may be about 15 or 20 where the federal government has come in and grabbed cases that involve arson, robbery, and other cases that traditionally they might not have taken before. I think there's plenty of reasons to distrust the Department of Justice at the highest level. I don't have that same level of skepticism about the people who work in our local U.S. Attorney's office, because most of them started their careers in my office. I know a lot of them. I think that they're trying to help out in some ways, but I think there's reasons to be concerned that this is going to be a political thing, because you see from the very top where the Bill Barr, the Attorney General, or the President of the United States calls us anarchist jurisdictions, and then they're run by Democrats and all that thing. And so it has become political from the very top. I'm not convinced that what's happening locally to take certain cases is a political thing, but it's something that we should all be concerned about.
Does your office work hand in hand with the FBI as far as the protest cases?
Well, often the U.S. Attorney can take cases from the local police, so that doesn't have to be a federal investigative arm. So they've taken cases from the Seattle Police Department as well. So we know that the FBI investigations typically don't involve civil unrest, and so we're not seeing that here like you might see in other places. But the cases that the U.S. Attorney has taken have been investigated locally, some from the Bellevue Police Department, and some from Seattle Police Department.
All right, Prosecutor Dan Satterberg, I appreciate you taking the time. Like I said, this gun violence is an issue that's very near and dear to us. We actually did a roundtable not too long ago with Chief Diaz and some community members. I think the next time we get together, it would be great to have you to join us as well and give some insights from your office.
Anytime, I'd like to talk about what we're doing. I think that we have some strategies that have some promise, but it involves standing up the community, building up community ability to respond to this. This isn't something that police can alone. Police presence has never prevented this sort of violence. We need police to investigate homicides when they happen, but the only way to prevent it is to really build up a robust community intervention strategy.
All right, fantastic. Dan Satterberg, thank you.
Thank you.